One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. It's your host, Sam Jacobs, and I am the CRO of Behavox and the founder of the New York Revenue Collective. This is episode 19, and we're going to be interviewing Liz Young. Liz is a member of the New York Revenue Collective, and she's also an entrepreneur, and she's going to walk us through the organization that she founded called Pump Women. So this is an awesome episode, and I'm so glad that you're listening. Of course, we also want to thank our sponsors. So this week, we've got two amazing sponsors, and we're excited to work with them. Aircall is actually going to be a sponsor for the next couple of months, so that's awesome. Thank you. First is Aircall. As I mentioned, they are a phone system designed for the modern sales team. They integrate seamlessly into your CRM, eliminating data entry for your reps and providing you with greater visibility into your team's performance through advanced reporting. When it's time to scale, you can add new lines and minutes and use in-call coaching to reduce ramp time for your new reps. So visit aircall.io/saleshacker to see why Uber, Dun & Bradstreet, Pipedrive, and thousands of others trust Aircall for their most critical sales conversations. And specifically, I know that Aircall is launching a sales module. They've been very focused on customer support. They're launching sales, and I think it's going to be fantastic. The second sponsor is Outreach, Outreach.io, the leading sales engagement platform. So Outreach triples the productivity of sales teams and empowers them to drive predictable and measurable revenue growth by prioritizing the right activities and scaling customer engagements with intelligent automation. Outreach makes customer-facing teams more effective and improves visibility into what really drives results. Hop over to outreach.io/saleshacker to see how thousands of customers, including Cloudera, Glassdoor, Pandora, and Zillow, rely on Outreach to drive higher revenue per sales rep. Finally, I did found this thing called the New York Revenue Collective. For those of you that are interested in what it is, just so you know, it's a group of about 65 plus CROs and CMOs in New York that come together for thought leadership and professional development. We just launched London. And so if you're out there in a different city and you don't have a networking group of sales leaders that you can connect with, shoot me a line and we can discuss, because we're seeing a lot of good growth with the Revenue Collective. Now, Liz Young is a member of the Revenue Collective. This is episode 19. Thanks so much for listening, and on with the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. I've got an incredible interview today. A good friend of mine and a member of the New York Revenue Collective. We've got Liz Young with us. So let me tell you about Liz before we get into the interview. She's a results-driven senior executive with a specific focus on leading companies from essentially before $1 million in ARR all the way through growth mode. She's got a broad base of experience across a bunch of industries, including VC-backed companies and publicly traded companies. And she's been doing this for over 10 years. And I got to know Liz most recently as the SVP of Sales and Success at Reonomy. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome. We're excited to have you. So for the way that we always say it, the baseball card, for those out in the world, for those of the people, the humans out there that don't know who you are, let's learn a little bit about you really quickly. So right now, what are you doing? What's your title?
Sure. So right now, I just started my own company recently, now 3 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And basically, Pump offers sales, marketing, and career education for women by women. So we're trying to solve, I think, two big gaps or problems in the market. One is that startups evolve way too quickly for traditional education, right? Like we can't use a textbook to teach people startup knowledge. It just doesn't work that way. So we bring in experts that are doing great jobs in the workforce every single day to help teach their learnings really quickly so we can avoid making their mistakes and learn from their big wins. And then second, being a woman in the workplace comes with a really unique set of challenges. And our goal is to help women navigate those challenges and set them up to succeed when they often don't have a female mentor in the workplace.
Well, it sounds pretty inspiring, to be honest with you. And I want to dive deeper into that through the conversation, because I think it's a really important topic, particularly because it's often hard to find somebody candidly like you, which is, a female sales and sort of like chief revenue officer leader. They're few and far between. And so I think it's a really important thing that you're working on. Give us a little bit of background on you before you started Pump. What were you doing? Obviously, I mentioned it before, but tell us a little bit more about, Reonomy and what you were up to just prior.
Yeah. So at Reonomy, we were a commercial real estate tech platform, data company. We had built a really large database of every commercial real estate property in the United States. So easiest way to think about it would be if you've used Zillow or StreetEasy for residential properties. We basically built that version on the commercial side. And I was running sales, marketing, biz dev there, and really working on a new product launch, a new suite of product launches. So it was an exciting time to join a company when we were looking at, hey, what's the best way to tackle this market? And, that's where from a sales leadership side, and for anyone who's listening that's doing a purely sales role, when you join really early companies that are in that phase of launching a new product or figuring out a new go-to-market, you get a lot of really cool horizontal experience that lets you expand your career pretty rapidly. But I was new to the world of real estate. I definitely was not a real estate expert. My, historical experience was mostly in restaurant tech and a little bit of financial services tech. I worked at a really small restaurant tech company and Bloomberg, a large financial services company. So I was a newbie to the real estate world.
Oh, I didn't realize you worked at Bloomberg. So really quickly on Reonomy, and then I want to dive deep into the background. What was the size of the team? What's Reonomy's rough ARR? How much money have they raised? Give us a little bit of framing for it.
Sure. When I joined Reonomy, we had raised just about $20 million, and now they're up to, the exact number is just under 70. So we're 69 and change.
Wow.
So I've raised a ton of capital and built a really defensible and unique data offering that just no one else in the space has built. So the only other really person in the space is CoStar, if anyone's familiar with that company. Basically, CoStar was this big incumbent that had built a commercial real estate data platform, but they did all of their work through a big call center. That's why they captured their data. So when we were looking at opportunities, Reonomy said there has to be an interesting way to do this better and more effectively. So we started pretty quickly sprinting at, hey, what are more innovative ways to build an exciting commercial real estate platform? When I joined, we had a very small amount of revenue. We were a pretty large team that was on the engineering side, but, just around the $1 million mark. And over the course of 2 years, consistently doubled the business year over year. We built a really cool offering where we were able to generate a ton of inbound leads. We were generating probably 2,500 to 3,000 inbound leads a month. And then we had a killer inside sales team that was closing those leads with an average sales cycle of 2 days. Contract size was a couple of grand a year. We were, closing clients that were about $200 a month. So it was a unique sales cycle and process, and it speaks to how strong the product was. 2,500
leads a month is pretty damn good. So congratulations for building an inbound engine like that. Tell us, where does Liz Young come from? Tell us how you got into the startup land, and let's start tracing the career, because I think one of the themes that you wanted to talk about, besides just female leadership and female executives in sales and marketing, it's also just young people and how to manage their career. So how'd you do it? Where'd you start and how'd you get here?
For sure. So I went to state school, University of Delaware. Definitely was not the most academic person. My parents joke that they paid for me to party abroad and hang out. But I was always a hustler. So I waitressed throughout school. I was a Bud Light girl, which was definitely my most prestigious job.
You've seen the worst sides of humanity and of the male gender, I'm sure.
Absolutely. But I was always a hustler. So I always worked at least 25 hours a week in school. And when I was leaving school, I knew I wanted to move to New York City. And honestly, I was willing to do whatever I had to do to live in New York City. I said, I don't care if I have to be a janitor, a waitress, whatever I need to do to live there, I'll do that. I was really lucky that I got a job, through my school, actually doing sales at Bloomberg, the big financial services tech company. So I start at Bloomberg, go through their training, which was really intensive and great, and begin doing sales for them. So I'm traveling.
Were you selling just the terminal, like the core product line?
Yeah, selling the terminal. And there you do a hybrid of account management and sales. And in hindsight, I didn't know how big of a business I was running at that point, but, several $1 million under management as a 22-year-old at this point.
Wow.
So was traveling to Chicago. That was my territory every week, road warrior, staying at fancy hotels, great meals.
The Drake.
I was a W Lakeshore fan.
Oh, there you go.
Anyone's been to that. The elevator sounds like a club, but learned a ton. That's definitely where I launched my sales career. But, after about 2 years, I was a top performer there. I had one large sale where I actually sold to a government agency that hadn't been sold to before. So I was doing really well, but I wanted an environment where I could learn more. So after about 2 years, I got the itch to leave and wanted to join something earlier stage.
Wow. Okay. And so where'd you go?
So I ended up going to a company called Breadcrumb that Groupon was in the process of acquiring. They were small though at that point, under 10 people, restaurant tech company. So we sold point of sale software. So I went from Bloomberg expense account, wearing a suit to work and working, covering multi-million-dollar accounts, to slinging $99 a month software to pizza shops in the Lower East Side, and cold calling like crazy. So it was a huge shock for me. But what I look back on, why I made that jump, and this would be my advice to anyone who's at a big corporate job and wants to jump to a smaller situation, is find someone that you can learn a ton from. And that's how I picked Breadcrumb over other opportunities, right? Like leaving Bloomberg, I could have worked a lot of places, but I met an entrepreneur who, the second I met him, his name's Seth Harris, he was the CEO and founder of Breadcrumb. I knew that was someone that I could learn an immense amount from really quickly. And I took the job. I mean, I quit Bloomberg within the same day that I met Seth. So it was a big risk, but definitely worth taking.
You don't fuck around.
No, don't mess around over here.
So we've got a ton of people. I mean, there's so many people out there that are working at, what you would think of as fairly cushy or comfortable, very defined corporate jobs. How did you manage that search? Obviously you're sort of getting restless and you say to yourself, okay, I want something a little bit more exciting. I want to go work at an early stage company. How did you manage that process? How did you end up meeting Seth in the first place? And what are some pieces of advice you can give to the audience?
So first thing is be honest with yourself about what your strengths are and weaknesses, right? So I ended up looking at restaurant tech in particular because I had worked at restaurants for the last 5 years, right? So I was a space that, although I was in financial services, I was really, really familiar with. I had been a waitress. I had used point of sale, shitty old point of sale systems for years. So I got it right away. The problem and the solution made sense to me. So I think, when you're starting to navigate this startup industry, which there's just thousands of options and, it's a really fragmented space, is look for something that you have an advantage in. And that could be because you know the industry, because you've worked in it before, because, your parents were in that industry. Just give yourself an advantage. There's no reason to make more work for yourself. So that's how I was able to say, okay, restaurants make sense. And in full transparency, I'd gotten inbounds, a lot of inbounds on LinkedIn. I know you get a lot of noise on LinkedIn. Answer those messages. You never know which one is the right opportunity. So I had answered a Groupon actually had reached out to me with a LinkedIn message saying, hey, are you interested in doing food sales for us? And I said, no, I'm not. I want to go work at a startup. And they said, well, this is actually perfect. We're, it's in the process of acquiring this startup called Breadcrumb. Why don't you meet that founder? And I think that was the first time I'd ever answered an inbound LinkedIn message. So my advice is understand your strengths, really prioritize companies that fit that profile, find someone that you can learn a ton from and that you get along with, right? Like early stage, you need to like the people that you're working with because you're going to go through hell and back together. And then answer inbound LinkedIn's, reach out to people. It's totally fine to send cold messages. That's some of the best hires I've ever made, were someone that inbounded me directly and said, hey, I want to work for you. And this is the reason why.
Yeah, it's great advice. So you meet Seth, you quit Bloomberg. And I think, to your credit, you were only there 2 years. The reality that I've had besides you with people from Bloomberg is it's a little bit hit and miss if they've been there for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years, because they sometimes perceive themselves to be a bit more entrepreneurial than the reality of how effective they actually are, because Bloomberg is such a big company and so supportive, and sometimes it's hard to lose that infrastructure.
Yeah. And paycheck. I mean, I'll be the first to say, like, if you're leaving the cushy corporate job to go work at an early stage startup, be prepared to take a meaningful pay cut for at least a calendar year and financially prepare for that, right? Like, I think I took about a 50% pay cut my first year. I made up for that within a calendar year by getting promoted very quickly and earning a lot of commission, but it's a much different world. Even just comp plan wise, at a large company, often you're even up to 70 to 90% base salary and then bonus. Whereas at startups, you're often looking at a 50-50 split between base salary and commission. So there definitely are adjustments in planning that need to happen prior to making that jump. But you're right, Sam. People often stay at large companies long because it's comfortable, right? They give you a ton of resources. And that's something I definitely went through a little bit of shock when I first left, is you don't realize how many resources you have when you're at a big company. So Bloomberg, for example, had a proprietary CRM that they had made in-house that was custom built for exactly what we needed as salespeople. When you go work for an early stage tech company, you're probably working out of Google Docs and maybe thinking about rolling out Salesforce, and you need to customize and build that from scratch. So it's just one example of how different resourcing is.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So you get to Breadcrumb, you readjust your lifestyle because you're a hustler, as you said, and you start selling POS terminals. It's a crowded space, but you advance pretty quickly. Walk us through sort of what happened over the next couple of years. Particularly, one of the big questions that we get is, I'm an individual contributor and I'm kicking ass, but how do I know that I will be a good manager? And how do I prepare myself, if at all, to take that responsibility? So how did you figure out that you were going to be a manager? How did you evolve into a sales leader? Walk us through that progression.
I knew I wanted to be a manager leaving Bloomberg, but I also knew that I was totally unqualified to be a manager. So when I actually asked to be a manager, when I got the job at Breadcrumb, and they politely told me absolutely not.
Kudos to you for asking.
Asking is half the battle. So I went in there from day one saying, what do I need to do to become a manager? And I was very clear with my boss about that, right? And I asked for frequent feedback and a frequent understanding of where am I now and what do I need to do to acquire the skills or experience set so that I can be a manager here. My advice, if you're an individual contributor, first thing is really think about if you want to be a manager, because there's two often separate career paths in sales. One is to continue on the individual contributor path, which in full transparency, often you can make more money and you get a lot more flexibility and freedom, right? If you're a killer individual contributor, you can, go have a long lunch and have a few glasses of wine. That's not happening when you're managing people. So I think first is decide if you want to be an individual contributor or a manager. If you get joy from coaching others and want to get a seat at the table and move to a path of leadership, then that's great. Really hone in on what skills you need to develop, because bulk of your work as a manager involves managing people and people's emotions. So your EQ is much more important than actually your sales abilities. So I think for me, a lot of it was learning how to motivate people. So I immediately asked my boss what I needed to do to get there. And I was asking for weekly feedback saying, how am I doing in developing this skill set to become a manager? So I guess it was after 3 months, my manager at the time said, hey, you're ready to be a manager, but you got to be the best at sales because the team will never respect you otherwise. And we had a team that was an interesting, eclectic bunch. We had some people that had been in the restaurant industry for 20 plus years. We had some tech people. So it was a really diverse team. And he said, so you have to blow out your target for the next 2 months. You have to double it. So I fought like hell to do that. And I was new, so I didn't have a big pipeline. So I worked day and night. I used Salesforce to my advantage. I started doing my own email marketing campaigns. I was walking into restaurants for hours a day and I got the job done. So I think my learning there from going to be an IC to make that first jump to manager, which I don't think is the hardest jump. I think the jump to senior management's harder, but I can get to that in a little bit, is figure out what you need to do to get that promotion and kill it. And companies will respond well if you're a top performer. Don't ask for a promotion or more responsibility if you're not doing a great job at what your job description is, right? Like earn the right to have an opinion and to ask for things. And that means crushing your job, and then you can take on more.
Yep. It's great. So many people come to me and they want to change in job. They want a different job when they're not performing very well at the existing job. You can't create an environment in a company where you get to constantly switch around, and it just doesn't work unless you're really doing an exceptional job where you were originally hired for. So
totally.
I completely agree with you. So you get promoted. I mean, it's still pretty quick. You're there. It sounds like 3 months plus 2 months is 5 months.
5 months.
Things move quick at Breadcrumb.
I think I'm technically a millennial, so that's a millennial promotion.
Well, you're one of the good millennials because you've got the work ethic to back it up, to back up the sense of entitlement. So what happened after that? And how did you ultimately find your way from Breadcrumb to Reonomy? Walk us through those steps.
I'm at Breadcrumb. Breadcrumb starts growing pretty quickly. I'm at this point a regional manager technically. So like director level, had a team of 10 people, was running the East Coast sales team. There was a West Coast manager and a Midwest manager. And the org was growing pretty quickly. And we decided that we needed a head of sales. And I wanted that job. And I knew I was the right person for that job. And I knew I could do it. So I again asked for the job. And again, I'm immediately told no. So I'm pretty used to rejection at this point. And we start interviewing people for the head of sales job. And I was on the interview circuit. And we bring in 50-year-old dude after 50-year-old dude that have, had 25 years of point of sale experience to be the head of sales. And I'm interviewing all of these people and I'm saying, I know I could do a better job than them. And we end up not finding the right fit for several months. So I'm killing it as the regional sales manager. My team is every single month above 120% to goal, winning the President's Club, all that stuff. So I just start doing the head of sales job. I start leading sales-wide initiatives, building out strategy, collaborating with the marketing department, collaborating with the account management or client success team. And after 9 months of just doing the job and interviewing 50-year-old man after 50-year-old man, they eventually said, guess what? You just passed the interview and the job's yours. So I ended up becoming head of sales there. Fast forward another 6 months, took over the marketing team. So at the end of my time at Breadcrumb was running sales, marketing, and sales ops. And we had a large team. We had 40 salespeople across 3 cities. I took the team from outside to inside, really improved the efficiency, spun up additional revenue streams. We had not only the point of sale software, but we were selling financing on the hardware as well as payment processing services. So we built a really awesome business. But at the end of my time there, it became clear that there was some transitioning going on with our relationship with Groupon. And I was introduced to a VC firm, from a contact in New York. I started just kind of seeing what was out there. I was still working full-time at Breadcrumb, but I wanted to understand my worth. And I'll say this for anyone who's been at a company for a long time. One of my mistakes that I made at Breadcrumb was I should have done that earlier. I had no idea how much I was worth. I should have gotten paid more for sure. So at least once a year, just test your value on the market, because the market, especially in New York tech, is changing pretty rapidly. And if you've been at one job for multiple years, there's a good shot that your pay and title is probably under market.
Yeah. So you start meeting people, maybe who are the VCs that you were connecting with? I'm sure some of them you're still close with.
Yeah, I met a few, and the one that actually ended up connecting me to Reonomy was Sam, a mutual friend of ours, is Brad from Primary. And he was great because he really, I think, gave me insights into what the tech landscape looked like. And this is now in 2015, what the tech landscape looked like. And it helped me navigate that because I'd been heads down just operating business for the last 3 years. I was a little bit naive. So it was good to have someone that you could trust help you navigate that. And when I met, he introduced me to a few companies. Reonomy was one of them. And I just immediately knew based on the quality of the team and the size of the problem and the strength of the product, that was the right fit.
That's awesome. Were you originally head of sales? Did you run marketing at Reonomy too?
I did not start running marketing. So I was hired as a VP of sales, and there was a marketing lead that I was not responsible for. And then as time went on, and this is something that happened to me at Breadcrumb and Reonomy, I ended up taking over marketing. And this is something I think is really critical for early stage companies, is having either marketing and sales be under one department or marketing and sales at least be really aligned. Why it's so important is because if you have marketing and sales butting heads, you're constantly going to have finger pointing and almost this conflict between the departments where marketing saying, hey, sales, you suck at closing our leads. Sales is saying, marketing, your leads suck, or there's not enough of them. So the reality is, to run a successful revenue or growth org, you need to get the highest quality leads as affordably as possible. And the only way you can do that is if you're looking at sales, sales lead generation, so BDRs, SDRs, and marketing lead generation holistically. So that's something that I worked to earn at both orgs by earning trust as a sales leader and then taking over marketing. And it's something I know I would recommend anyone who's joining an early stage company to at least look for a team where marketing and sales is very aligned, because it's going to lead to a more successful growth strategy.
And do you feel like that alignment comes from giving marketing specific kind of closed revenue KPIs or responsibilities? Is that what are your strategies for driving alignment?
Yeah, I think one is having joint goals that everyone's working to achieve. So I think what a challenge you run into is when marketing just has a lead number target and they don't have any end of funnel targets like quality meetings or revenue. They're just not incentivized to do the right things, right? They're incentivized to get as many leads as possible, and the quality doesn't really matter. So I think one is making sure you have goals that the entire growth org is working towards achieving together is crucial. And two is compensating marketing professionals a little bit more like salespeople. Salespeople are lucky, and we've been lucky, both of us, Sam. We really get compensated well when we generate a lot of revenue. Historically, marketing hasn't been that way. So I'm a firm believer, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a similar commission structure, but at least giving marketing bonuses based on the revenue that they're helping contribute to generate. One other thing that's critical too is just messaging. So often if you have the departments not speaking enough, your messaging and marketing can sound totally different than what your sales men or women are saying, right? So if you look on the website, that should not sound all that different than what salesperson over here is saying when they're talking to a prospect. So making sure messaging is aligned throughout both parts of the org is really critical, because it gives the prospect a better experience and increases their likelihood of converting.
Absolutely right. I think the point that you make about the compensation structure is really interesting. I think my experience is you have to find that marketer or that marketing team that's willing to embrace that variability and willing to truly understand that, life is going to be a little bit more uncertain, because it's not just going to be about the MQL is a function of this lead score. And if you got 20, then you got 20 and you can go home and not worry about whether they closed or not. So I think it's good feedback, good lessons. You've now, in a very short amount of time, moved from just being an individual contributor to a regional sales manager and then running a bunch of different teams. So what are some of the biggest lessons that you take? You had a comment offline about 18-month cycles on your career. Walk us through what that means for people that are listening.
Yeah, I think where I've benefited the most is being open to taking a lot of risk and moving really quickly, especially in my early and mid 20s. So when I look back at my 20s and what set me up, I was running sales at Breadcrumb and had, 40 salespeople under me when I was 24, right before I turned 25. Really young, got that opportunity. So one is I took risk, right? I jumped from this cushy corporate job, took a big pay cut because I knew it would set me up for longer term success. You're able to take that type of risk when you're 21 and just have to cover rent, right? Fast forward 10 years, if you have kids or you have larger bills, you might not be able to take that risk. So take risk young when you can. 2 is run your career in 18-month cycles. What I mean by that is every 18 months, you need to have real growth in at least one of the 3 main areas of career that I always try to focus on. So first is cash. How much money are you making? 2 is title. So what is your title and what type of position are you able to get? And then 3 is knowledge. And this is the most important. What are you learning? Because I will gladly, and this is what I did at Breadcrumb, take less money if I can learn a lot, because that is the most valuable asset of all. And if you're not really getting major growth in one of those 3 buckets in an 18-month time period, it's time to go. So run 18-month cycles on your career. It's okay to leave somewhere if you're not getting growth in one of those areas, but you don't need growth everywhere, right? So it's okay to take a cash hit if you're learning a ton or if you're going to get a title promotion. And I think timing is really key, right? So a lot of my success came from making deals internally, asking people for promotions, understanding what I needed to do to get those promotions, being extremely persistent in understanding what I had to do to get there. But make sure you ask at the right time. So one is ask when you have leverage. Don't ask when you just miss quota. Ask when you're crushing your quota, and also ask when you know that your interests align with what the business needs. I think that's a mistake a lot of younger people make, is it's all about me. But the reality is your boss's job, whether it's the CEO or the VP of sales, is to do what's right for the business. So you're going to be most successful in growing your career, growing your compensation, if what you're asking for will also lead to greater success for the business.
That is really good advice. The other thing that you're doing implicitly, because sometimes you don't have to ask, it's not necessarily you have to promote me right now. It's I want to be promoted. I want to be a VP of sales. What do I need to do to get there? Let's build a plan together. And I think a lot of people, they don't ever actually make that explicit ask, and they don't work backwards from, okay, no problem if it's not the right time, but what are the milestones that I need to hit? And that often forces the management to define what the responsibilities and what the requirements of the role are, which I think is also a healthy exercise.
Completely. And it makes you prepare for the role more effectively. So if you start, working on that prep and more or less doing the role earlier on, you'll be a lot better at the role once you do it. Like in hindsight, I was actually a pretty bad manager at first at Breadcrumb. But now I've had enough experience that I understand and I've learned from that. So I think, ask, really self-reflect, and also be okay with rejection. I was told no every time I've asked for a promotion, more or less, but no just means not right now. It doesn't mean never.
That is why you are a great salesperson. I have a question just for so many people that are just getting into management. And you mentioned that you were a shitty manager at first, and now you've become a pretty good one. What are 1 or 2 or 3 key tips, tactics, strategies, mindsets? How can someone be a great manager or just shortcut and, not make some of the same mistakes that you made?
Yeah, I think one, if you're getting promoted from being a peer to being someone's manager, which I went through at Breadcrumb, you're going to run into some awkward situations, right? So I think first is make sure the team believes that your job is to make their lives easier and make them more money, right? If your team that you're now promoted to run thinks that you're going to roll out a bunch of things that are going to make their life more complicated, they're not going to want to rally behind you. So I think earn their trust by saying, hey guys, we're going to do some things. They might not all be pleasant, but I promise my goal is to make you as much money as possible and help you with your career. So I think that's critical. First is just really setting the stage for what your goals are. Second is I made the mistake of being way too distant from my team at first. Managing a team and being a director or VP, the hardest part of that is the people piece, is understanding what makes people tick, understanding how to make someone have a good day if they're having a bad day, understanding people's emotions. And I think I was concerned when I was younger that I didn't want to come across as being immature or someone's friend. So I over-indexed on being cold and distancing myself from the team. And what that resulted in is a team that didn't really care about rallying behind me, right? Because they didn't feel a personal connection. So after a few months, I said, let me try to become closer to my team, understand, about people's personal lives. And once I did that, and once I got to know individuals and really got to know them as humans, I became a much, much better manager and more effective manager. We got way better results because I knew why they were coming to work every day. So I think really get to know your team and the people that work with you, because that will, really, really benefit the team's productivity.
Yeah. So many people become managers and they feel like they need to present themselves in the image of what they think sort of like a tough person looks like.
Totally. I felt like I was one of those little kids wearing a suit. I was trying to be something I was totally not.
Yeah. Well, it's great advice. You started Pump. I would love to talk about that a little bit. One of the questions is obviously you mentioned that, women face a very specific and unique set of challenges. What are those challenges in your opinion? And how should women in the work specifically in sales and marketing What do women need to do to make sure that they get the same opportunities, the same pay, and all of the same glamour and accolades that men get, particularly when it comes to startups?
Yeah, the main thing that Pump's goal is, and we're not trying to say, hey, we don't want to elevate men as well. Our goal is to say, hey, we want to make sure women are getting the same opportunities, to your point, and getting paid the same as men are and are set up for success. So I'll give you an example of one area where women are different than men, especially on the sales and marketing side. So women generally make great salespeople. They naturally have skills and interpersonal skills that tend to translate to being successful account executives. But when you talk about women negotiating for themselves, they tend to be actually much worse than men. And it's interesting, especially around compensation. Women are generally pretty good at negotiating for developmental resources. So saying, hey, Sam, can I have additional education? Can I have some work-life flexibility? But when it comes to compensation, historically, women are much worse at negotiating for themselves for compensation than men are. So that's one example of an area where Pump has really focused on saying, hey, how can we help women negotiate so that their pay is at least on par with men? And that's not the only reason why there's a gender pay gap. There's a lot of other reasons, but our goal is to bridge that gap as much as we can. So our first event, actually, our launch event, which was in June, was a huge success. We had 100 of New York City's best women in growth. We did an awesome panel, and it was all around negotiating for yourself and giving true tactical advice about how you can increase the amount of money you're making today. And the response we've gotten has just been incredible. I mean, I got a text this week from a friend saying, hey, I never asked for a raise outside of my annual review. And I did that for the first time because of Pump's event in June. I used the tactics I learned from your speakers at that event and got my first raise out of annual cycle that I've ever gotten in 10 years of work.
What are some of the tactics? Share so that folks that weren't there maybe can learn a thing or two.
Yeah, it was great. So we had a few VPs of sales that are actually in the Revenue Collective, Sam, with us. And a lot of their feedback, was around things that we've chatted about on this podcast. So one is timing, right? Ask at the right time when you have leverage. Don't ask when your boss is having a terrible day. Make sure you're setting yourself up for success. Two is know what you're negotiating for and who you're negotiating with, right? And any concerns they'll have about you. So if you're asking for a promotion and a large raise, but you know that your boss is going to have one or two concerns, prepare for those and address those initially right before you even ask for the raise. So address them head on. Three is make sure you understand your worth. So if you're paid under market right now, that's a valid point to your boss. So make sure you have a clear understanding of your worth in the market and prepare that information. A lot of it's around preparation and timing. And also don't be afraid to ask. A lot of the fear that women have in particular around negotiating for compensation is because it's often perceived as being manly or being too aggressive. And historically, when women have asked for compensation changes, raises, men find it to be too aggressive. It's not in line with, and I'm doing air quotes, but of course you can't see it right now, how women should act in business. To know that you're going to deal often with those attitudes and those feelings and be prepared to handle them.
I think it's really, really good advice. A part of it is, one of the things that you mentioned is a lot of people, it's an abstract complaint sometimes without a specific ask. And so one of the things I always tell people in any negotiation is, if you want more money, have a number in mind, because it doesn't do me any good as your manager. You say, okay, I want a raise. I say, how much? You say, well, I don't really know. It's like, okay, well, then it's not quite clear that money is really the driving issue here. Something else is going on.
And think about the business too there, right? So if you're a killer salesperson, you've been doing ops work, you've been going above and beyond, and that's, save the company from hiring a sales ops person, that's a great point for your negotiation. So it's, hey, Sam, I've been above and beyond. I've been doing some of this ops work. An ops person costs $70,000 to hire in New York City, and I've taken care of 25% of that. So I deserve X raise just to right size my current income, let alone for the promotion that I'm asking for.
I love it. Honestly, some of it, Liz, is just confidence, and it's hard to replicate the confidence that you have, but you don't have that need for approval. You're not worried that you're going to come across, as you said, too aggressive. You're just saying, this is the reality of the situation. It's capitalism. I'm doing a service, and this is what it costs.
You're spot on. Confidence is key. And that's something with Pump as we expand. I'd love to even go earlier to women as young as high school, because that's really when building that confidence starts. And I highly recommend people working in the hospitality industry, because I think that's where I got a lot of my confidence, was being a waitress, right? I learned how to upsell, make someone buy a bottle of wine, make them get dessert, be in a lot of very awkward situations with clients, which at that point were, people I was waiting on. But it definitely was my, starting point for getting confidence in dealing with other people.
Yeah, it's great advice. Last question I have for this little section, and then I want to sort of pay it forward and get some other thoughts as we're coming to the end of our time together. But you mentioned to me in a different context, you said focus on cash compensation when it comes to startups. I think that's maybe it's becoming more prevalent a point of view, but it's certainly controversial relative to like a couple years ago. So walk us through your thinking there.
Yeah, the reality is, and I've learned this over the past few years, is startups, you often really focus on your equity compensation because there's always, as a salesperson, there's generally three types of compensation that you get. You get your base salary, you get bonus or commission, and then you get equity. And the reality is, unless you join a company really early, seed, maybe Series A, if you join a later stage company, the company has to have a really, really large exit for you to be able to make real money off of it for a few reasons. One is because you have to pay to exercise your options, right? So this is, I think, something that a lot of people don't understand early on is you're not just getting shares for free. If you join a Series B, Series C company, you're getting options that you have to pay to exercise at a later point. And then you have to pay the taxes on those shares after you've exercised them. So it can be very, very expensive, almost crippling to purchase your shares as an individual contributor salesperson. So because of that, it's best to optimize your cash and still fight for equity, right? I'm not saying not fight for equity, but there's such a small percentage that your equity will be worth an amount that really changes your life, where your cash compensation can absolutely change your life much more quickly.
So when you're negotiating for cash comp, are you saying to the salespeople out there, to your point, that are on 50-50, is it ask for a higher base? A lot of the CFOs out there say, I'll give you a higher base and I'll give you a higher OT, but you're going to have a higher quota. Does that factor into the consideration? You say, okay, fine, I'll sign up for a higher quota. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you really know the business, right? Because you don't want to set yourself up for failure. And if you're signing up for a higher quota to get a higher base, that can be a slippery slope. So make sure you understand the historic performance of the business. What have other reps in this position done? Because you don't want to sign up for something that you're just doomed for failure, because then that can result in you actually being terminated. So I think one is be smart and don't sign up for something that you can't achieve just to get an extra 10 grand on your base. Fight for a lot of upside. So make sure the compensation plan, the commission piece, has acceleration, which means for every dollar of revenue that you generate over your goal, you get paid more than every dollar of revenue you generated under hitting your goal. So look for acceleration, look for uncapped commission to make sure that if you just absolutely crush your quota, that you could buy a fancy sports car and travel the world. Like, you should be able to do that as a top performing salesperson, and make sure the plan is achievable. And what I mean by that is ask for the distribution of performance historically. So you want to know, did only 20% of people hit target? If that's the case, then this is probably not an appropriate plan, and the plan needs to be right sized. Make sure that you're looking for at least 60 to 70% of the team achieving quota.
That's really good feedback. So the hard-ass CFOs in the world will say, fine, Liz, I'll give you acceleration, but I want deceleration too. And I want, if you get 80% a goal, you're not getting 80% of your OTE, you're getting 60%. How do you feel about that? And then the specific debate that I often have with CFOs is the kind of like the cliff, where sometimes there's comp plans out there where like below 50% of your goal, you don't get anything at all. Do you have a point of view on those types of comp plans?
Yeah, I'm okay with having deceleration below 100%. I think that's fair, right? If you're getting paid more for outperforming, then you should also be penalized if you're underperforming. So I'm okay with that. The cliff, I'm not a huge fan of. So the issue I have with the cliff is if someone is not going to hit target or not going to clear the cliff and they understand that, it incentivizes sandbagging and holding the deal till next month when they feel that they personally have a better shot of at least clearing the cliff to make some commission. So I never support things in comp plans that incentivize sandbagging, because that's not good for the business.
Yeah. Also, the business still makes money when somebody makes a sale, so they're not really aligned. And it frankly just sucks to have people make sales and not pay them anything. It's just not a fun feeling.
Nothing kills morale more than having broke salespeople. So I try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. So a couple last questions, just highly tactical, as we like to do. One of them is, we're in the sales enablement, sales technology world. The New York Revenue Collective has, sponsor, and the podcast as a sponsor. What are some of the great tools that you use that you can't live without?
There's so many. And I think that's one of the challenges actually now, is to not get overloaded with all the options. But I'm a huge Insight Squared fan. They're a sales insights company that for a very small amount of operations effort and implementation, you get an immense amount of insights and detail and value into what's going on in your sales funnel. And it's actually incredible how little work you have to do for the amount of data you get from them.
That's awesome. It's a great tool. It's always surprising because there's a group of sales ops people that they view it as sort of like a mark of shame if they have to go out and buy Insight Squared. But it makes a lot of things a lot easier. And sometimes it's just better to just put it in and not worry about a bunch.
Yeah. And if you're at an early stage company and don't have the resources to have a full-time dev on a BI tool for you to build out custom dashboards in, a Tableau or similar product, then Insight Squared is an awesome off-the-shelf option.
Yeah, agreed. So you mentioned it before, but like any mentors or people that we should know about in your career, you just want to pay it forward, we can sort of go on LinkedIn, look them up, and maybe shoot them a note. Who are some of the people that have influenced you over the last couple of years?
Definitely the CEO of Breadcrumb, Seth Harris. He taught me so many things, taught me grit, taught me that you have problems every single day. And basically you're paid as a leader at a startup to overcome them as quickly and effectively as possible. Definitely to show me what leadership looks like. So he continues to be a big mentor of mine. He's a repeat startup founder. And then also, I unfortunately live with another founder. My husband is a CEO of a company called Electric. They're a Series A company in New York. They're about 55 people now. That's just revolutionizing the IT world through Slack. So it's really nice to have a sounding board over the dinner table to talk about growth challenges and how to scale a business.
Yeah, and you guys do a bunch of deals together, right? You're doing real estate deals together and you're talking startups. So
yeah, we just rant at each other about anything. We love anything that's the hustle. Any way to make money we're interested in.
Well, I love it. Any books, podcasts, any content that you consume to get better that you want to share with the rest of the folks out there?
There's so many good podcasts out there. So I think listen to podcasts all the time. I'm a Tim Ferriss fan, which is, everyone listens to, I think, but I really enjoy his podcasts. I'm not really loyal to one specific podcast, but if there's someone interesting on any podcast that I like, I'll listen to it. I'm currently reading The Originals by Adam Grant, and it's phenomenal. Highly recommend it. It's about how to select or create original ideas and then how to actually act on them. And he's a psychologist, and it's been fascinating to read.
That's great advice. And then lastly, give us your motto in life, because the one that you shared with me, I think, is one that I try to adhere to. So what's that?
Have an early morning routine. When I have a regimented early morning routine, I am so much more productive than when I don't, and remove any optionality in the morning, right? So have your clothes picked out the night before. If you're a breakfast eater, have your breakfast ready to go. If you have to make decisions in the morning when you're a little groggy, it will slow you down. So if you're able to get up, deal with all of your personal BS, pay your credit cards, answer, your family's emails, pay the cable bill in your office and already hit the gym and you're in the office by 8 a.m., you are going to be more successful than everyone else, and your mind will be more clear to tackle the day.
What time do you try to wake up?
If I'm really good on my routine, I'm not super early. Like 6 a.m. is fine. I can get all that done because if I have everything picked out the night before, I'm really fast in the morning. So I don't need an hour to dilly-dally around the apartment.
6 is pretty good, especially if you're a millennial. Most millennials are, it's not 6. I can assure you of that. So
you don't have to get up at 4:45 if you remove a lot of the things that slow you down in the morning.
That's great advice. Lastly, so if we want to get in touch, if there's women out there that want to join Pump or learn more, if they want to reach out to you for advice or mentorship, is that okay? And what's your preferred method of communication?
Absolutely. Go to pumpwomen.com and we have our full list of events displayed. So please join us for an event, or you can email me at liz@pumpwomen.com if you have a specific question or are curious to learn more.
Wonderful. We will do it. I hope you get some emails. And Liz, thanks so much for participating. It was great chatting with you.
Thanks, Sam.
Hello, everybody. It is Sam's Corner. Wonderful conversation with Liz Young, one of the founding members of the New York Revenue Collective. So we see each other often, and we're always excited. She's a really strong female leader in the sales community in the US, but specifically in the New York tech scene. She just launched Pump Women. Please check it out. I think, we talked about a bunch of different things, and a lot of it's just related to the frame that you can extract from Liz is that she has a specific and intentional point of view on how she manages her career, and she's not ashamed or self-conscious about that. And I think that's really inspiring and something, if you're young, it's not just about wanting more. It is about applying specific goals. If you want a promotion, you may not be ready, but understand what you need to do to get that promotion and specifically articulate the desire. Hey, I'd like to move up. I'd like to be a manager. What do I need to do? That's very different than kind of grumbling and not saying anything. And then at the end of the year, complaining and saying, why didn't they promote me? Well, sometimes, that old mantra, if you don't ask, you can't get. So make sure you articulate what your desires are, what your goals are. If you want more money, say it and say how much money you want. Again, another problem in negotiation is people ask for things they don't know what they want. They're just unhappy. It's sort of like an existential angst. Every time I go into negotiation these days, I know exactly what I'm going for. I have a number in my head. I have a specific deal term that I'm looking for. And I know that when I get that, no matter what, I've got to be happy with it. So you can't have buyer's remorse after, here's your raise. You said you wanted 70. You were making a base of 60. Here's your raise to 70. You say, oh shit, they didn't give me 75. Well, that's on you if you didn't ask for it. So if you don't ask, you can't get. Be intentional about your goals and don't be self-conscious. Just provide a framework for how you're going to achieve them. If you're not ready, understand what you need to do to get there. This has been Sam's Corner, and I'll talk to you soon, everybody. To check out the show notes, see upcoming guests, and play more episodes from our incredible lineup of sales leaders, visit saleshacker.com and head to the podcast tab. You'll find the Sales Hacking Podcast on iTunes or Google Play. And if you enjoyed the episode, please do share it with your peers on LinkedIn, Twitter, internal email, however you prefer. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter at Sam F. Jacobs or on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Sam F. Jacobs. If you have feedback about the show, if you have guests that you think I should be focused on, if you would like to be a guest, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll do our very, very best. So thank you so much. And do share the content if you find it to be interesting or engaging. And if you think I'm doing a shitty job, let me know that as well. Now, a big shout out to our sponsors for this episode. We've got two, as you know, AirCall, which is your advanced call center software, complete business phone and contact center, 100% natively integrated into any CRM. So really incredible technology. And Outreach, a customer engagement platform that helps efficiently and effectively engage prospects to drive more pipeline and close more deals. I will see you next time.